Hello there and welcome back to Backyard Ballistics. Today's video is offered not only by my supporters on Patreon, but also by Sport Guns Armory, which lent me the gun we're gonna talk about, so once again a big thanks to them. Before going any further, if you're a gun owner, could you please comment the country you reside in and what guns you own? I have a future project and I need some data. Thanks. Going back to today's topic, I'm sure you've seen a magazine like this many times, but what about this other one? It's a Shotshell Magazine. It holds shells instead of metallic cartridges, and it is a detachable box magazine made to fit a shotgun, which is not a common solution. In fact, such guns typically use tubular magazines placed under the barrel, while box ones are much more common in rifles. The gun we're gonna cover today was actually built around this magazine, so let's dive a bit deeper and let me give you some food for thought. First, why don't we normally see shotguns with box magazines? That's because of the shape of 12 gauge shells. They're thick compared to their length, while the opposite is true for metallic cartridges, so stacking them one in front of the other makes sense in order to reduce bulk. After all, the barrel is already long, so you might as well place a tube for the ammo parallel to it. Also, differently from rifle ammo, there is no pointy bullet that could accidentally set off a primer and the recoil, and that same pointy end is what helps cartridges get fed from the magazine to the chamber, so another reason why box magazines aren't typically used in shotguns. Yet here we are, when Franchi of Italy decided to make their new combat shotgun look like an assault rifle. It was the year 1986 and their previous combat shotgun, the more traditional SPAS 12, had already been on the market for 7 years, receiving positive feedback from all over the world, which pushed the company to further improve the design. From their efforts, the new SPAS 15 was born. And as you guessed, the main difference from his older brother is the use of a detachable box magazine instead of the much more traditional tube. This required a redesign of the whole feed mechanism, but the rest of the gun remained practically the same, including the iconic dual mode of operation. At the push of a button, the user can select if the gun has to operate as semi-auto or pump action. But after going through the effort of making a gun semi-auto, why would you convert it back into pump action? The reason is that the SPAS family of shotguns was mainly aimed towards law enforcement use, and that's the kind of customer that might want to shoot less lethal ammunition as well. Those, however, generate pressures and recoil impulses that are roughly 1/10 of what full power ammo does, so they would jam any semi-auto action, and here's where the pump action comes to the rescue. When using less lethal ammo, you would set the handguard in the pump position and cycle the rounds manually. For safety reasons, nowadays we tend to have dedicated shotguns for less lethal rounds in law enforcement, but for a combat shotgun of the 80s, the dual mode of operation was certainly a good selling point. It's not a coincidence that in those same years, Benelli came up with their M3 dual-action shotgun. In this regard, look at this large red label printed on the side of the mag. Its purpose was to tell them apart from mags loaded with less lethal ammo that were marked green. Clearly not a fail-safe design, since the green magazine didn't prevent the accidental use of lethal ammunition, but that's how things were back then. Anyway, like its older brother, the SPAS 15 is gas-operated, meaning that some high-pressure gas is spilled from the barrel during firing and conveyed into this cylinder, where it pushes against the annular piston, which in turn transfers motion to the bolt carrier group through these rods. The bolt is of the common rotating head type. It locks when the carrier pushes it against the barrel and opens when it's pulled backwards. Also, notice how they use coaxial springs in parallel to make them take less space. That way, they didn't have to place the spring in the stock, as was common in shotguns of that period, which meant that it could be made collapsible, another nice addition for a combat shotgun. This, together with the 45cm barrel, meant that the gun could be transported in a relatively short package, but unfortunately not in a thin one, and here comes the reason why 12 gauge box magazines are uncommon. Due to the size of the cartridge, which is thicker than a 50 BMG at the base, the magazine gets very bulky and you're limited to single stack and very few rounds in it, actually less than in a typical tube magazine. This one holds 6 rounds and is bulkier than a 30 round AR magazine, while tubes can easily hold 8 rounds while practically adding no extra bulk. The advantage of the box design, of course, is that reloading is much faster, since you just have to swap magazine instead of loading 6 rounds one by one, provided of course you're carrying enough, which is not that likely considering how cumbersome each magazine is. Also, they're not standard by any means, nor super sturdy, since large flat metal surfaces are somewhat easy to bend and dent. Have you ever asked yourself why metal magazines or even your washing machine have these reeds stamped on them? Now you know. I wasn't of course going to torture test this magazine that the gun shop gladly lent me, but the feed lips also look like they wouldn't really enjoy falling on a hard surface. Another slightly awkward thing about this design is the position of the charging handle that is placed below the transport one, where it can be reached by both left and right-handed shooters, but while being uncomfortable for both. Remember that in semi-auto mode the pump is locked, so the only way to rack the gun is by using the handle. A few other downsides of the design are a consequence of the dual operation. First, in order to work as semi-auto, it needs the recoil springs I showed you earlier, which are needed in pump mode. However, there is no way of disengaging them, so you still have to pump against the springs. And there's more. In this last mode of operation, as in any pump-action shotgun, there must be a bolt lock system so that you don't inadvertently open it before firing. In semi-auto mode, the pump is fixed, so there would be no need for an additional bolt lock, which however can't be disengaged, so the loading handle gets stuck every time it goes forward until either you pull the trigger or the lock is disengaged. And here's yet another thing that the SPAS 15 does differently. They decided to use a common lever both for the external safety and the bolt release. So if you want to open the bolt without shooting, you have to put the gun on safe and the bolt will be unlocked. However, the lock has to be reset anytime the bolt goes forward again, but since the lock and safety are on the same lever, this means that anytime the bolt goes forward, the safety is automatically disengaged, which is a bit sketchy. Making dual mode shotguns is clearly no easy task, and I haven't yet talked about the biggest problem, which was however cleverly solved. When the gun is in semi-auto mode, the pump is detached from the bolt carrier group and locked in place, while cycling is performed by the gas piston. When we switch to pump action, what we're doing is essentially making it integral with the bolt carrier group so that we can move the whole thing acting on the pump. However, the gas system is still in place, so it would slam backwards the whole assembly, pump included, pulling it away from the shooter's hands unless measures are taken. In our case, in the form of this rotating part, which is essentially a tap. When the pump is locked forward, which means the gun is in semi-auto mode, the tap is in the open position, allowing gas to flow from the barrel ports into the cylinder, pushing the piston back and the whole assembly with it. However, when it is put back to activate pump mode, the tap is rotated and the barrel gas ports are completely closed, cutting out the gas system. Even though mostly intended to be sold to military and law enforcement customers, the SPAS 15 was also put on the civilian market, where however it encountered a couple of non-technical issues. The first is the existence of cheaper combat-style shotguns, including some with detachable magazines. I'm thinking of the Saiga 12 AK pattern shotgun introduced in 1997. But the second and equally important problem is of legal nature, largely because of its appearance. Some countries, most notably Canada and the US, put heavy restrictions on it, which is a bit funny considering that the firepower of such a gun is the same of any other self-loading shotgun. Anyway, in the end, SPAS 15 went out of production in 2005, and even though it didn't reach the notoriety of its older brother, it was still featured in many video games of franchises such as Rainbow Six, Max Payne and Battlefield, and also a few movies. As far as I know, it still remains pretty rare in North America, while in Italy it is instead present in much larger numbers on the used market, where its price typically oscillates between 600 and 900 euros. Anyway, that's all I wanted to tell you today. Once again, a big thanks goes to Sport Guns Armory that provided the gun shown in this video, and an even bigger one to my patrons, which as usual are all listed here. Thank you all for watching, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.